time for Type 40, your Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's King of the Geeks and designated driver. If you're new to our show or you've stepped aboard before, you'll be happy to learn this is the free-speaking, big-thinking, eclectic and eccentric show for everyone, whatever decade or century you started watching, reading or listening along to the ongoing adventures of our hero, Doctor Who. And with a new season underway on BBC One and broadcasters and platforms all over the world, we're making our way through this six-part run now known as Doctor Who Flux, making sure to throw in a few laughs along the way where we can. So come and step into our TARDIS and share it all, Flux by Flux, here with us on Type 40. Now, yes, in recent times, I don't know about you, but for me, it's been rather an odd feeling as we count down the weeks to a brand new series of Doctor Who beginning on the BBC or whatever. The unmistakable feeling of excitement and that rejuvenated childhood wonder that I felt all through my life, you know, even during the wilderness years, picking up a new book or a magazine or whatever, well, that had evaporated away as this current era, show run by Chris Chibnall, had played out. Deliberately divisive and, let's be honest, a real chore to sit through a great deal of the time, even if you've got some sort of jelly babies or fish custard or whatever at hand to guide you through. Series 13's premiere was arguably upstaged by recent announcements and events that aren't going to actually happen on screen for roughly 2 years. That isn't timey-wimey. I don't know what is. But as Doctor Who fans, of course, we are season or series ticket holders, and we're here in front of our screens, whatever size they may be on whatever device. We're here for the duration, aren't we? And yeah, we'll go down with the ship if we absolutely have to. But back here with me again for Chapter 2, we've got the presence of the analytical, I knew I'd struggle with that, analytical mind and the barbed tongue of our friend Charlotte Shields. Welcome back, Charlotte.
Oh, don't give me that much of an intro.
well, this is it. I mean, this is what I've noticed about your takes. You come in with something clean, something incisive, and it's like a big penny dropping that I can hear in my brain and sort of rattling around as all the little lights go on, things that I had missed or not seen in quite the same way. And I think that's the beauty of getting a group of Doctor Who fans together. And this is depending on even people who may have received an episode in completely different ways, you know, from either side of the aisle that's dividing the fandom at the moment. This is the great gift of fandom, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, I think Doctor Who, we have such a wide range of fans that love this show. And in times gone, we can have a nice discussion about it and sort of have our grievances and what we liked or didn't like. But the good thing about Type 40 in this podcast is we can do that, and we can all have very different views or have some similar views sometimes. So that's the fun of it.
I think so, yeah. But of course, when we last spoke, the pair of us, we were left, weren't we? Left in the wake of the closeout of episode 1. I can't talk this stuff up without breaking into a laugh. But in the 7 days in between, obviously you've been left on the edge of your seat the entire time. So I was wondering, have the family had to sort of hoover around you whilst you've been there? People have been bringing you food parcels. How's it been for you?
Oh, just Chibnall episodes, it seemed to just have this effect that I watch them and like I'll talk about them and I might think basically if I'm doing a stream, but otherwise it just goes out of my thought process until the next one. And this is one of the few eras that happens. Even like during some of Capaldi's run at the beginning when I was struggling, I still would sort of not feel so disconnected. And well, with Chibnall episodes, it's like they wash over me once I've watched them. And especially that one, it was so busy. And I really think, and we'll get onto this later with the figures, I think it was a mistake to chuck that much into one episode.
It could well have been. And talking about connectivity and connecting, let's bring in the other half of this review panel, the return of Barnaby Jago, and the even more shock return of Simon Horton to live reviews of new Doctor Who episodes.
Seems not a moment too soon.
Can I just check? I am in the right place, aren't I? We are here to talk about that wonderful, wonderful time-traveling sci-fi show that I've loved for 48 years. Oh, no, sorry. We're here to talk about the new show that calls itself Doctor Who. That's right, I remember now.
Of course.
Yes, the skin suit show, isn't it? Barnaby, it's great. It's great
The shambling corpse, yes.
It's great to have you back, because you were here on the Series 13 preview show, weren't you? And you were not exactly chomping at the bit, but I think you were in a reasonable place, weren't you? That you were going to give it a fair old shake. But of course, we've had an episode since then. So I was wondering, would you like to bring us up to speed and tell us what you made of the Halloween apocalypse?
Me?
Yeah.
The Halloween apocalypse. Again, I've heard a lot of complaints about the all these characters we don't know are brought in, and of course it's going to be explained later on. But that and you know the woman with I've already forgotten their names. That's the thing as well.
That's the problem.
It's what Charlotte was saying before. It's what Charlotte was saying before with them. You know, it just sort of washes over you, and particular characters that come up like the woman who was at the museum with Dan, and the other woman who suddenly.
What's her name?
Oh, does anyone remember?
Oh no, was it Claire? Oh no, was that the Weeping Angel?
I thought it was Janet, but I could be completely wrong again.
They all kind of like. They all sort of like have kind of blended into one. But for me, it was just sort of more of the same, really. I mean, he's trying to put something together here. He's trying to, we've got all these roots that are suddenly going to be explained later on. But it was just so obvious that these are things that are going to be explained later on, and we've kind of seen that. Moffat in himself did that a lot, but he did it in a lot more of an entertaining and a lot more of a interesting way, a lot more subtle, where it's not like, here's a character, oh, she's sort of interesting, she knows the Doctor, oh, she's gone now, but we'll see her later on. And it's just so obvious when that was kind of going. One positive though, I did very much, there was a line that made me laugh, which was with Carbonista, I think is the name of the dog, wasn't it? Yes. His relationship with Dan, that was funny. And also when the Doctor gives him his house, which had been shrunk. And Dan kind of goes, I can't live in that.
That was a pure Russell T Davies moment, wasn't it? And with this, I think so far, Chris Chibnall has continued to borrow from Russell and from Stephen too, to start trying to ape what Stephen did so well. I think nobody's perfect, are they? Creatives, writers, whatever you want to call them, however you want to classify them. And Stephen Moffat's no exception. But he had a certain panache.
Yes, he kind of left you. Yes, he kind of left you wanting more. He wanted, like it was with River Song and that kind of thing. And even though River Song was built up over 2 episodes, and that was still something we wanted to know, but I just feel no compunction to really want to know what is going on with Lisa or Linda, or I'm going to look it up on the wiki now.
Put us all out.
Oh God!
Yeah, it could be weeks until we see them again. But I thought it'd be some weeks until we saw Simon Horton again, because this is the biggest shocker of them all.
Yeah.
The last time you were here to review an episode was The Timeless Children. You and I spent an unbelievable 2 hours going through that absolute chore, the mess of a piece of television that destroyed Doctor Who lore. You did say you were done. We both of us found the last season unwatchable, and you were out. So what has brought you back to the series this time?
Okay, the brutal truth is, anything that's brought me back is because when episode 1 aired, my other half just left it running after Country File. It was literally just on the television, and so we kind of thought, okay, then let's just kind of watch it.
Oh God!
I mean, and that is the absolute honest truth. The other shocker is that actually I will happily go on record as saying this is the best Doctor Who has been since Chris Chibnall took over. Now, admittedly, that's really not saying very much.
Low bar. I agree with you.
It's a very, very low bar. It's still way, way, way down. So please nobody get any ideas that I actually enjoyed it or anything stupid like that. But the reason I'm saying this is because I want to prove that I'm not. I've been criticised so many times.
It's not partisan.
For just basically you just want to knock the show, you just want to hate the show, you just want to criticize it, and that's not true. I do want to come from it to it from a totally subjective angle and look at it on its own merits and then make my own decision. And on this one, I'm happy to say, yes, it is the best Doctor Who Chris Chibnall has ever done. Having said that, it is still, for me, utterly disastrous. And I know, we're not here to talk too much about Halloween Apocalypse, but, I can quickly run through my thoughts on that because they're fairly short and concise. I would argue that the first 90 seconds of the Halloween Apocalypse are the most badly misjudged 90 seconds of Doctor Who in the entire history of the show, without any doubt. I would argue that, because so many people have turned off after that first 90 seconds, and I was nearly one of them. As I say, it literally came on at the end. You're
speaking not just as a viewer, but as somebody who's worked in television for some years, so this is true.
What on earth were they thinking of? And as I say, because it literally just followed straight on from Country Fire for us, as it did for a lot of people, so many people would have just gone, I don't want that, because it was just the most banal, idiotic rubbish. It would have been fine on CBBC, but not at 6:30, 7 o'clock on a primetime show. And as I say, I would argue it's the most misjudged 90 seconds in all Doctor Who. I would compare it with something like, let's take the first opening 90 seconds of The Trial of a Time Lord. Now, however much JNT might get knocked and however much the Trial of a Time Lord season might get knocked, the first 90 seconds of the Trial of a Time Lord are probably the best 90 seconds of any Doctor Who story ever. Yeah. And so that, to me, is how you reach out and you grab an audience that haven't been with you for a long time and you say, remember this show, you're going to want to watch this. And instead, Chibnall gave us what he gave us, and so many turned off. And it's just like, what are you thinking? And for me, actually, that first 90 seconds is key to the failure of the whole 2 episodes that I've seen so far. And that is that there's a terrible schizophrenia at the heart of Flux. On the one hand, it wants to be fun and funny and everybody's laughing and it's all funny and jokey. And on the other hand, it's trying to tell what is basically the biggest cataclysmic story of all time, because it's talking about the Flux, which is going to wipe out the entire universe. Now, again, I would compare this to, let's say, Logopolis, which actually has a similar premise. The last couple of episodes of Logopolis are all about the entropy field. She's going to swallow the entire universe. I think that's
a really viable comparison.
Yeah. Now, these are big issues. The universe is being devoured by the Flux in this case. In Logopolis, it's being devoured by an entropy field. Now, you tell me where the humour is in the last 2 episodes of Logopolis. There isn't any, and that's because these are big cataclysmic events. You simply can't tell a cataclysmic story and then have a comedy talking dog and a comedy sequence at the beginning where they're all being kooky and hanging upside down and they're whizzing through the air like they're in some Disney ride in Walt Disney World. The two are incompatible, and to me it shows the problems with Chibnall's writing. He doesn't know. He either doesn't know who his audience is, or he's just panicking, and it's just like, just throw everything at the screen, everything at it. Something will stick. I'm sure that the audience will like to think about this. Give them drama, give them comedy, give them things that they don't understand. So they like something, but they don't.
It's funny you should say that, because I think throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. That was what Kyle Wagner said on the last show, wasn't it, Charlotte?
Yes. Well, we just sort of said it's got this air of panic. I think that's also maybe a word we might have said. And it just feels like Chibnall has been told, you need to make this last series actually good, please. Can you actually give us something that you can go out a little bit with your head held high? And it's like, it's just like, right, I'll do this, and it's just like, oh.
Always.
I'll just do anything. I'll do anything.
Yeah. I mean, schizophrenia is...
back. Yes, schizophrenia is the prime. It's
the perfect word for it.
Perfect word.
Even the writing as well. I remember in the Halloween Apocalypse, just like certain things they'd write, and then they'd just be completely. It wouldn't make any sense later on. Like, why on earth is the dog alien who's supposed to, look after humans trying to kill Yaz at the beginning? I think there's also a certain bit where the two guys keeping what's his name, Azure or no Swarm on the on the planet. You know, one of them goes, "Don't talk to the subject," and then she immediately starts talking to the subject. It's just kind of like, I mean, I'm very anal because I see these things.
No, but this is true because for years now, Barnaby, Doctor Who has been made. I think since Russell T Davies come back. I'm going to go for that again, everybody. Since Russell T Davies came and brought the series back in 2005, I think Doctor Who has been made for the rewatch era. They knew that people were going to be watching it in box sets. Maybe they'd be originally VHS or DVD, and now they are not physical media box sets. But I think that Russell always understood that. With Chris Chibnall, I honestly think that he's making television now because of things that you described there, because I've noticed them too. And I'm not great at noticing things like that. Because of things like that, I think he is almost banking on the fact you are never going to watch these episodes again. And so nobody will pick up on it. Or at least by the time you do, he's gone. He's out. He's picked up his money. He's buggered off.
But Barnaby is absolutely spot on, because I noticed that exact same issue in the first episode. And the thing is that frustrates me is it's just a sign of a poor writer, because actually it could have been brilliantly handled, because all you needed to do is you needed the one character to say, "Don't talk to Swarm," and then talk to them. And the secondary character, who was the trainee, to say, "Excuse me, I thought you said," and so you suddenly got a nice bit of dynamic. You can have some witty, sparky dialogue across the. But no, we'll just ignore that and throw that opportunity away. And it's just like, what are you thinking?
It's almost as criminal as when the Cyberman, Charlotte, the lone Cyberman Ashad, when they'd been warned, don't give him the Siberium under any circumstances whatsoever, weeks before by Captain Jack. And so they immediately, as soon as they meet the lone Cyberman, they give him the Siberium right away, Charlotte.
This era just feels like Chris Chibnall either isn't allowing a script editor, or they're scared to death to tell him anything that's wrong in these scripts.
Apparently there are 2 script editors on this. I don't know if they're job sharing or what's going on there.
They're not doing their
Somebody
job,
surely would have just pointed. Somebody surely would have just pointed out and said, "Chris, this line just doesn't quite." But no, apparently not.
This is going to be so much fun before we get into completely sort of tearing apart week 2 or not. I don't know how this is going to go. Before we get too deep into it, it's time for me to remind you that if you want to do some real-time traveling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or 2 away on the device of your choice if you know where to look. There's dozens of great conversations, reviews, previews, geek outs, and deep dives with our regular panelists. We know there's something for every fan at type40.podbean.com. There'll be more about all of that a little later on, as well as when we make contact with the matrix of all knowledge. To us, that's the Fandom Podcast Network, for a word about all the other cult conversations that are going on across all those other shows over there. Okay, so that's you guys all primed and warned. These Zyton 7 crystals are frying. It's time to make Chris Chibnall sweat buckets as we head into our review of War of the Sontarans. Here we go again. So, yeah, if you missed it, or you've been to bed and got up a few times since then, you can't remember exactly what went on in this story. Was it a case of Sontar Ha, or was it just a big Sontar LOL? Here's a quick reminder of what went down in War of the Sontarans. The Doctor has an unexpected encounter with one of her deadliest enemies when the Sontarans become a new faction in the Crimean War. As the British Army goes into a pitched battle with the warlike aliens, the Doctor and her companions seek the help of renowned nurse Mary Seacole, while an ancient temple hides some mysterious secrets. Cue the dramatic sting. Okay, so War of the Sontarans. It does. They always sound awesome, don't they? War of the Sontarans starred Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, apparently. Mandip Gill as Yasmin Khan, with John Bishop as Dan and Jacob Anderson as Vinda. This story, I'm going to just show my hand a little and say that I think this one had something resembling a story, Barnaby.
Yes, I actually think it was an improvement over the Halloween Apocalypse, definitely. I think the Sontaran story was really great fun. I mean, this is what I also love about Doctor Who. You know, historic armies fighting, you know, futuristic armies. I mean, that was a great thing to kind of see. The actors playing the Sontarans were brilliant. I mean, I love the new design of the Sontarans as well. I was never a big fan of their design in the Rusty Davis era. I think their design now is far more far better for a warlike race. So I think that seeing them more sort of gritty and sort of grimdark is definitely up my alley a bit more. And and brilliant performances done by the other cast, not quite from the title character, but from Sarah Powell, who was brilliant as a Mary Seacole. I really enjoyed her, actually. I think she did a really, really good job. And also the chap who played the general as well, General Logan, I think that chap was called.
Yeah, I've got the cast list here. So General Logan was played by Gerald Kidd, I think it's pronounced, K-Y-D.
Yeah, a great character. You know, you always got to have someone who's, maybe kind of sort of like the villain-esque of the. It
was broad, wasn't it? But it was broad on the
broad villain.
It would have been broad on the page.
Yeah, broad on the page. But even then, he had a character, he had an arc, and you kind of saw where he was coming from as well as you could see where Mary Seacole was coming from as well. So and as well, you know, the villains as well, Azure and Swarm as well. The actors playing them are really, really good. I actually quite like them as villains at the moment. They had a great, they had a great kind of like monologue kind of thing, even though it was silly. The planet Time, that was very silly. But even then,
but I think with these new creatures, I think that even though they are only in the episode for probably precious minutes of screen time, you are kind of more convinced, I think, by their villainy when they're on screen. I think because both actors, I think, are playing it quite well in quite a restrained way. There's something about that is working, whereas everything else may not necessarily be working. And so whether that's more schizophrenia or just people who are a bit more seasoned coming into the playground and showing them how to really play the game. I'm not sure which of the two it is, because at the end of the day, it's the same guy putting the lines, the dialogue in all everybody's mouths, isn't it, Barn?
But it is. I mean, it's the parts being better than the whole, I think, because even though the guest stars were brilliant, the title character is still not good. That's the thing, and the companions are still all over the place. That's the thing as well, particularly Yaz in this episode as well. I mean, she introduced herself, I think, in the Halloween Apocalypse as a police officer. I mean, I'd forgotten at that point that she had been. And apparently she's... Yeah, so would she as well. Didn't do anything at all in any way involving a law enforcement officer. So that was par for the form there. Yeah. So a step up, I would think a step up. There was a story. There was still that Deus Ex Machina at the end, which I did not like. What was it? You see, it's just so forgettable. I already forgot what happened. There's some sort of time explosion that just
because it's all mumbo jumbo that it's impossible to make this mumbo jumbo settle in your mind. That's why, you know, for all that things like timey-wimey may sound quite facile, you know, you remember them. Whereas reams and reams and reams of mumbo jumbo, it just washes over people. And we're geeks. Can you imagine what the general audience feel about it? And I think another thing about science fiction storytelling too, which I think that general audiences and fans receive slightly differently, are not just the returning villains, but threat too, imminent threat. And I think that one thing that they did right to start off a season like this last time in the Halloween Apocalypse is they ended, you know, because this is the first time they've done an umbrella story in 35 years on Doctor Who properly. You know, I don't count dribbling a word through a season as an arc. You know, it's with the best one in the world. I don't. This was ambitious, so they had to have that first cliffhanger be an absolute blinder. And to be fair, you know, they did leave us on a pretty dark moment and a big statement. We saw the rippling wave of the Flux at the very doors of the TARDIS on its threshold, about to, as we assume, sort of course its way in and sweep them away. Whatever was going to happen, we had no idea. And whilst I don't think people were talking about that cliffhanger all week, I think it was a decent cliffhanger. And I was I don't know if I was disappointed or not. I think I was actually reassured, really, because it was a typically Chibnall move, I think, Simon, to pick it up 7 days later and not actually address that cliffhanger at all, to just move the story on. So is it actually a cliffhanger if you only ever get one part?
Well, of course it isn't. Well, it is a cliffhanger, I suppose, in that respect. It's in every respect, yes, actually, it is a cliffhanger because it's never resolved. So it's always hanging on the edge of a cliff, actually. So it's the ultimate cliffhanger in a way. But the whole point of a cliffhanger is you have to resolve it. Or, again, as we said, well, as I've said a few minutes ago, it's a sign of a poor writer. To be perfectly honest, Dan, until you just reminded me what the cliffhanger was to episode 1, I literally couldn't remember it. So if you'd asked me, I honestly couldn't have told you what the cliffhanger was to the end.
It's great to have cliffhangers back. You know, we're all classic fans to one degree or another, and it's nice to have the cliffhangers back. And I also think it's nice too. I think it's the restoration of the cold opens at the beginning of the episode to have a pre-credit sequence is also something that Doctor Who really needed, and it was a very silly mistake that Chris Chibnall made. That was pure arrogance that made him from series 11 onwards, all but say 2 exceptions, he dropped the cold open completely. Just to deliberately mark it out as being different from Russell's and Stevens' runs, without thinking about why and how it actually works. And here we've got him restoring the cliffhanger without actually taking the time to figure out why cliffhangers work and what the trade-off and the payoff must be.
Well, and the other thing, I thought that the cliffhanger to the end of War of Sontarans, and I realise we're getting sort of a bit ahead of ourselves here and leaping right to the end for a second, but talking of cliffhangers, I actually thought the cliffhanger to the end of episode 2 was pretty good. It was a proper,
it was also good, yeah.
It was a proper Doctor Who cliffhanger in every sense of the word. But of course, the difficulty is that I have absolutely zero faith in, at the beginning of episode 3, being resolved in any satisfactory way. It will be thrown away again, and so that's the problem when you create strong cliffhangers. You've got to have, and to be completely clear on this, classic Doctor Who is just as guilty of this, of writing itself into brilliant corners with brilliant cliffhangers and then throwing them away at the beginning of the next episode because they can't actually write themselves out of it. So this isn't just something we're leveling at Chibnall, but it's one of those things that you would think you have learnt your lesson from. Chibnall should have learnt his lesson from classic Who, that if you're going to write a good cliffhanger, you've got to be able to write yourself out of it, or you end up looking like a poor writer, and that's what he's done.
And all I'm going to say is, I'm guessing you haven't seen the Next Time trailer then.
Do you know what, Charlotte? No, I deliberately, because I've always done this since New Who. I've always done. I don't want to see, and this isn't just Doctor Who. This is something across the board of television. It drives me mad when they say, "No, I don't want to see what's going to happen next week. I can wait till next week to see what's going to happen." Thank you. So it's great.
It's great with little kids. I think they particularly like it. But Charlotte, you know, as regards this, seeing as we are there, we're on that cliffhanger. I do think that Chibnall has given us another good cliffhanger there, and in theory, by focusing too on human interest. Yaz is a human being, allegedly. We know very little about this character, but to focus on her, it's one thing because we've got the big stakes, haven't we? As Barnaby was describing, we've got a lot of old mumbo jumbo. So we've got those big stakes, but they mean absolutely nothing unless we see the immediate there and then impact for somebody who we are supposed to care about. But Mandip Gill and Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor and Yaz, they were separated from the entire episode, weren't they? Which I think was a bit of a small mercy, wasn't it, after last time?
Yeah, but he does this a lot. He seems to hardly want to put his companions with his own Doctor. It's like the amount of times in the last series this happened as well.
Do you think he knows they've got no chemistry? Because we found that out last week on Halloween Apocalypse. I had that slip that last week. That was something that felt like a big wet fish coming right across my face. I don't think I'd noticed before how little chemistry those two actresses have got together. And do you think he knows that too, and that's why he does it?
Oh yeah, and I think especially because of her being separated, she had a lot of scenes with Vinda in this episode. And I actually thought those two had good chemistry. They actually worked on screen. And I was like, how on earth have you managed this, Chibnall? This is a new character. This is the first time he's properly been in an episode, because it was flashes we saw of him in episode 1. And he's already sparking off Manip. And Jodie's not done that for 2 series.
I hadn't thought
despite
of
what Despite what
do you think it's because they're both quite thin?
Will tell you.
Do you think it's because they're both quite thin characters, Charlotte? Because, you know, Jacob Anderson, as I've said before, really nice guy. You know, we've heard him talk about being in Doctor Who. This is a bit of a dream come true for him, and it's hard not to respond to that and to, you know, this is somebody's ambition. But the character, it's also very thin. Yaz is a very thin character, and so they at least feel like they belong in the same universe, in the same space.
Well, I think it's a bit of Jacob has natural charisma. We saw that in the Comic-Con, in the little video. We all said he seems quite nice. And he had a bit of something about him, even in that little clip, like when it was just him without any acting. And I think, honestly, putting him next to Yaz, it helped because they sparked off. But it made Yaz look Manip look worse, because just Jacob was just had charisma. He was likable.
He's the newcomer.
You felt when he was a bit confused and he didn't know what was going on in the temple, you bought that confusion quite well. Whereas with Yaz, as soon as she was there, she was like trying to be the big, oh, I can fix it. She wrote on her hand like a child. And it was just like, compared the 2 characters. And I actually have an interest in Vinda, just off what Jacob Anderson was doing. And this is the little theory I have, to be fair. I think Chibnall can write male characters better than female characters. Because
the irony.
If you look at all the characters from this era that anybody's connected with or has said any sort of positive, I think you've got Graham, you've got some people really like the Master, Jacob, some people like me are really taken to Dan. I honestly think Chibnall can somehow write males better than females.
I think you're spot on, Charlotte. And the other thing that does strike me is, obviously we will never know, because we'll never see Chibnall really right now for another TARDIS crew. But I think he writes very poorly for the TARDIS crew, for the Doctor and companions, because, and this runs right the way back to the beginning of the Chibnall era, the relationship, the fam, which I can still just throw up at the thought of. But the way he writes them, it's very insular. It's not inclusive, it's exclusive. You as the viewer are excluded from this group of people. You're allowed to stand on the sidelines and watch them having a wonderful time. You're not invited to have that wonderful time with them. And it's become even more insularized now with the Doctor and Yaz. Dan is kind of this outsider that's come in and has been sort of shoehorned in. So really the relationship at the moment is between the Doctor and Yaz. And so because there's only 2 of them, it's become even more insular now than it was before. And as a result, it ends up feeling that I'm just not really welcome in this world, in their world. And that just doesn't, as a result, warm you to them. And so that's why when you split the 2 of them apart, it at least begins to separate them out a little bit. And you almost feel a little bit like you might at a party, for example, if you're trying to get into a group of people and they're constantly turning their back on you, you feel cut off. Okay, now they're separated, I maybe actually be able to get a little bit of the attention of them myself. And that's really, again, it's just poor writing on Chibnall's part, that he doesn't allow us as viewers to be welcomed into the dynamics of the Doctor companion relationship. Whereas you're quite correct, Charlotte, the dynamic between Vinda and Yaz is better because she's separated from the Doctor. And let's be clear about this. The Doctor, as the Doctor stands at the moment, is a very toxic character. I don't mean toxic in the way that she's going out to be toxic, but she's toxic in that she's difficult to like, she's difficult to warm to. In fact, let's be perfectly honest, she's bloody impossible to like or warm to from where I'm standing. Yep. And so that just that just excludes you as a viewer. You're done. I'm out of here. Whereas Vinder is a likable character.
She makes stupid decisions and alienates everybody who she comes into contact with.
And she also comes across as terribly, terribly smug without any justification or reason whatsoever. I could buy Tom Baker being smug or John Pertwee being smug because they exuded confidence and authority and intelligence. Bless her, Jodie Whittaker, with the best will in the world, doesn't exude any of those things. And so she has absolutely no justification to be smug. And so you end up just hating her because you're just irritated by her smugness.
Yeah, but I think I said last time that the character, for me, the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, the entire thing's all wrapped up. Both of them, it's now completely irredeemable. I know that she's not going to do anything with this character at all. There'll be no surprises coming from Whittaker between now and the centenary special. I suspected I was out a long time ago, but I'm absolutely out. No investment whatsoever in what she's doing. I wanted to ask you, Barnaby, because the last time we spoke, Barnaby, you said to me how much you'd enjoyed Bradley Walsh in Series 11 and Series 12, and how much you suspected you were going to miss him. We also spoke about John Bishop and the fact that he was undoubtedly being brought in to fill that dynamic, to be kind of Bradley Walsh 2.0. So how are you warming to Dan? And particularly in this episode, how do you think John Bishop is acquitting himself, fitting into this cast and making this character kind of real?
I am warming to him, actually. I didn't think I would, but I am. I think there is just something funny about seeing him run around with a wok, just hitting Sontarans in the back. Even I've seen a lot of reviews who complain about the parents as well, and I kind of enjoyed the parents scene because it was just so ridiculous that it kind of like happened that I just found myself engaged. And and I do really enjoy his relationship with the dog alien, with Carvanista or whatever he's called. That whole kind of just sort of like just so annoyed by each other. It did get a couple of chuckles out of me, so that was good. So I'm warming to him. I think he's definitely my favorite kind of like companion.
I sometimes feel like scenes from another series altogether, of some other show altogether.
Yeah, I mean, he started off very, very annoying. I
thought he was terrible in episode 1, both Carvanista, and I think I said on the last show, I was very harsh that John Bishop is no actor and was exposed in this as completely out of his depth. I thought he was a little better in this one and felt at least comfortable in what he was doing and able to actually act rather than just to stand around watching other people say things. So there's something that I think is gradually happening with him, whether it'll reach any real pay dirt before episode 6, whenever it is he leaves. I don't know, but I can see a man having fun. I can see a man trying, which I can respect both of those things.
And also sort of accentuating the threat as well. I think with the scenes with him running around Liverpool, seeing civilians get executed in front of him while he's holding this wok in his hand and I think he's really sort of emphasizing the threat because he doesn't know what he's doing, but he kind of like shows that he doesn't know what he's doing. So it may be a silly premise, but I get that from him. So I'm like, okay, I kind of want to see where it's going along there, and even though we had the Deus Ex Machina at the end, which sort of like took that and just threw it all away, I was still taken in by his performance there. So he's growing on me.
There's something kind of carry-on film about it all. I think as you say, not in a campy way, just in a way of this is an average British bloke doing his best, completely out of his depth, and not ashamed to admit it. But how perversely, when he gets on that weird sort of conference call with the Doctor in the Sontaran ship, she describes him as her best man who's on the case. And she expects this guy who she's known for 5 minutes and who has been around aliens for not much longer to he's okay, I can delegate that sort of destroying the Sontaran ship, or at least halting a Sontaran invasion. I can leave that to Dan. He'll have it nailed. Why on earth?
And this is the common denominator. I mean, this great character, but as soon as he starts connecting with the title character, it all falls apart. So we can see again the problem.
Yeah, you're spot on actually, Barnaby. Because the thing is with this character in particular is he feels very, very much shoehorned in. It's probably the worst a kind of integration of a new companion into the TARDIS team that we've ever seen, because it just feels so clunky when he asks if he can come along, and why do you? It's just like, oh, please. Yet again, it's poor writing. Come up with a good reason as to why he's going to come along with you in the TARDIS, rather than just ask, shall I come? Yeah, okay, then you. It's just like, so it just feels very, very clunky and awkward.
I prefer them not show us at all. I prefer an entrance like Mel had than one that feels so.
It feels forced. It does feel very, very forced. And I have to be honest, I'm not sure as I feel his acting was any better in episode 2 personally. He really is showing himself up to be a dreadful actor. I'm sorry, John. I'm sure you're a really funny comedian. I don't think you are, but I'm sure you probably are. But you're certainly not an actor. And it's just, for me, it isn't so much that he's a bad actor, so much as, for me personally, he's got no charisma at all as an actor. Again, we're back to that age-old problem. He has no charisma. He's coming across to me as very, very flat, unengaging. There's nothing bad about him. He's not acting terribly or embarrassingly. It's just like, there's just nothing. It's like he's dead. To me, he's giving a very, very dead performance.
Yeah, hit the mark, say the lines, and that's pretty much that. There's an incongruence about it.
Yeah, take your money and go. So I just feel no investment in him. And again, for me, the whole business with the wok, it's just this schizophrenia again. Are you doing comedy, or are you doing the end of the entire universe? Come on, make a decision and go for one or the other. I just don't. They just sit. They're sitting very uncomfortably for me.
Because at times Chris Chibnall's going to great lengths, isn't he, to amp up threat and to restore a greater sense of menace and mythology to a long-standing Doctor Who monster. We'll come to them in a little while. And so to do that with one hand, and at exactly the same time, completely depower them with another, and turn them into little more than model soldiers that can be effectively knocked down, it just strikes me as very, very strange. And I like time travel in my Doctor Who, and we don't get enough of it. The Crimean War isn't a period of history that I know a great deal about, and Mary Seacole isn't somebody that I'd never heard of this woman. When it was announced that we would be going there, both the Crimean War and that another historical figure, a woman of colour, would be featuring heavily in a Chris Chibnall script, alarm bells started to raise, because in the past, Chibnall has tokenised such people, hasn't he, Charlotte? And he's used it as this weird kind of currency, almost to buy favour with people who may not be watching this material with our simple desire to be entertained. So when the Doctor does meet Mary Seacole, I mean, we're there in the Crimean War at the top of the episode where Yaz and Dan disappear almost immediately, exactly like you said, Charlotte. They separate the Doctor from the companions right away, and not in the classic series sense of it, where they find different corridors to run down. They get out of the equation. No contact. Their fates aren't even intertwined at all for the bulk of this episode. They're out of the picture. The Doctor immediately bumps into Mary Seacole just strolling across any old field in the Crimean War. That war took place over a large area. It wasn't some playing field around the back of a high school somewhere. And yet, but the way that she bumps into her, it's exactly the same way that she bumped into the historical figure in Spyfall Part 2 in the Second World War. It's exactly the same lockstep. So I was wondering if you'd heard of Mary Seacole before you watched this, Charlotte. And are you aware, because this character, she's not a Rosa Parks, her place in history isn't quite as clear-cut, is it? And this has also provoked people out there in the fandom. So how do you think this was all handled?
Well, I said last week that I thought Mary Seacole was in this episode, and that got me nervous because of the track record of historicals with this era. And to be fair, and to give credit, I actually enjoyed the bits of Mary Seacole, because I think he did give a character, he did give a purpose in the story. She was basically the Doctor's assistant, like the proto-companion. in this episode. So at least she wasn't just stood there and everybody was saying how brilliant she was. That was what my fear was.
And yet, and that's true, Charlotte. And yet, they rarely looked at one another.
Well,
they barely exchanged glances.
The problem was, yes, she was active. Yes, she was, and the actress was brilliant. I agree with Barnaby. I really enjoyed the actress.
She was fantastic. Yeah,
she was a proper. She even, I think, she stole some scenes, like when she was like bossing people about, and she was like being that sort of. I loved it. I think she was really good. But I do have little nitpicks. There was a little jab at Florence Nightingale. They did go there a little when she basically said, well, she wouldn't be at the front lines. So that and that was my problem throughout this whole episode. The politics are starting to creep back in. Yes. But I'll get more to that later.
2 or 3 times I noticed both his own sort of general politics and identity politics. It's funny you mentioned Florence Nightingale there. As I say, I know very little about history, but I do know who Florence Nightingale was. We did her at school. I understand that Mary Seacole is somebody that a great many people have a lot of knowledge about, and her history is a lot less clean cut. And academics have been debating Mary Seacole and her place in history for some decades. The controversy is that some of her achievements are those which many historians feel were achievements of Florence Nightingale's that have been wrongly attributed to Mary Seacole. And there's also allegations that, not allegations, I mean, it may be documented fact for all I know. Apparently Mary Seacole was considered to be a racist and had some very strong ideas and some very unconventional and aggressive methods by which she would get things done. She wasn't this cuddly aunt type figure that we get given in this story. And the reaction I've seen to this episode is that whereas Rosa Parks, I know there's debate as to the whole Rosa Parks story about who did what and exactly when, but the core principle of that historical figure has made it through the translation to Doctor Who in a fairly pure way. Certainly the way that that period in history is talked about in schools, for example, where the Rosa Parks story is taught. Whereas this is a whole other ball game and something that's a lot more prickly to handle. And whilst Chibnall doesn't spend a huge amount of screen time with that, and he doesn't look under too many rocks. I think he's very cavalier with this character, and she's there just to be there in the same way that Noor Khan was. Is it Noor Khan in Spyfall Part 2? She's just there, and they've cast her well, but it could be pretty much anybody. And so if it could have been pretty much anybody, why handle such a contentious historical figure in such a superficial way, I think is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, see, I would say it was an idealised version of Mary Seacole. That's the word I would use.
And there's nothing wrong with that because Rosa Parks was that too. But is this a false representation? And is that dangerous? Is that where... Because Doctor Who, in its history, Simon, I think the thing with Doctor Who in history, during the classic series was that it's okay to serve people cod history as long as you don't contradict what was actual historical fact.
But if and I have to be honest, I hadn't heard of Mary Seacole, and I can't even comment on the historical accuracy or otherwise of this character, and I had no idea what you're talking about, that possibly she might have been racist. I know nothing about that. If that's true, if that is correct, then what Chibnall is doing is what we're all being told endlessly we're not supposed to do, which is whitewash history, or I guess in this case, for want of a better word, blackwash history, I guess. And that we shouldn't be doing that either. I must be brutally honest, given the track record of Doctor Who and indeed television in general these days, when I first saw Mary Seacole in this episode, my first question was, if this is a real historical character, I trust she was actually black, because it's very frequent that they might just recast somebody white and recast it as a black character, and the fact that I even have that in my brain just goes to show that there is a problem within television. And the reason, for anybody that might be shocked by what I'm saying, the reason I'm questioning this is because you only need to look at the Anne Boleyn, I think it was on Channel 5, the Anne Boleyn series, where Anne Boleyn was recast black. So this isn't unprecedented. And so you immediately, I'm thrown off guard, and I'm immediately dubious, well, not necessarily dubious, but questioning of the veracity of any stories that I'm being told. And because I felt that the Rosa episode was so manipulative, not necessarily historically accurate, but nonetheless manipulative, I take it all with something of a pinch of salt. And then when you get thrown in, when the Doctor first meets Mary Seacole, and Chibnall just couldn't resist the barbed comment about being a male, and the Doctor says, "Oh, it's fluid," and I was just like, "Oh, we're not going to let this one go, are we?" Yeah. Clearly, any opportunity we get still to just remind people that it's justified that we've turned the Doctor female, it's just tiresome. And so, as I agree with everybody else, that the character was brilliantly portrayed, and actually it was very well written. But because I'm left, and she was one of the highlights of the episode.
I thought so too.
But because I'm left with this nagging dubiousness at the back of my brain as to how relevant it was, how genuinely historically accurate it is, it leaves me with questions that I don't particularly want to be left with. And I think maybe you're right, Dan. It maybe would have been better just to go with a character who was called Audrey or whatever. Why make it Mary Seacole? On the other hand, looking at it from the other perspective, it's going back to the roots, the very, very roots of the show, and we've got a little bit of a history lesson going on here, and it's made some of us, me included, go and look at Mary Seacole. I wanted to know who she was, and so in that respect, all credit, that's what Doctor Who in a way should be doing. So, on the one hand, there's a thumbs up.
I think. Sorry. No, I think overall we just have to remember this is a historical episode written by Chris Chibnall. So whatever it kind of like comes up there, whatever sort of like characters kind of turn up from historical characters, we always just look at and go like, well, it's a Chris Chibnall episode.
I think you're right, Barnaby. That's what I'm trying to say. Left. Yeah. Well, before we've even started, you're kind of on the back foot of thinking it's a Chris Chibnall episode, and so how accurate is it going to be? How genuine is it going to be?
Exactly. Yeah, it's written by him. So
yeah, and also all Doctors can be a bit of a fan when they meet historical people. That's not a new thing to this run, but I feel like with Jodie's Doctor especially, she goes over the top with praise when she
wasn't surprised to particularly
characters. It's like there's no criticism at all, whereas I feel like in previous runs, if there was a known trait of a historical character that wasn't the most positive in the world, it wouldn't be a massive focus, but the Doctor would have one little comment.
It acknowledge it, yeah.
Well,
but this person was a human, not a superhuman.
Well, it comes back to the Mind of Evil, where John Pertwee goes crazy about Chairman Mao.
Yeah,
a character who is a historical character who's a little bit
questionable,
a bit odd, questionable. Yes, so this is hardly, it's just a bit of fun,
and that's why I'd rather they spend time with historical figures. I think that the blueprint for me to do it correctly is Charles Dickens' episode, The Unquiet Dead, back in series 1. They preserved that historical figure and paid him due respect, whilst showing him as being a flawed human being, beautifully cast and played. But the core principle of who Charles Dickens is accepted to be now, 150 years since the prime of his life, was recognizable, and was unarguable. Whereas a character like Mary Seacole is a different question entirely. It's somebody that academics are still arguing about, and it's not something.
And I suppose then in that respect, there's me saying that, yes, it's good that we're kind of getting this history lesson on Mary Seacole, which I would say is a good thing.
Yeah,
but then if you are going to give a history lesson, you've got to make sure you're getting it right and it's totally accurate. And if, Dan, you're correct that it isn't entirely accurate, or maybe it's part of her story and by no means all of it, you are literally then guilty of whitewashing history. And that's just
I would have
slightly...
liked to have spent more time with the Doctor and Mary together on that relationship, rather than just saying things at one another whilst not looking at one another. All of a sudden, they become Cagney and Lacey. They've not bonded at all. So they're just working together. Whereas the time that they spent building up the general character, and I agree, Barnaby, I thought he was really well played. And I do like that sort of mustachio type character. We all enjoy those types of characters. But that screen time because what did he actually? Oh, well, they needed him to ultimately be the bad guy, didn't they? That's why he needed to be there, silly Dan, because he is a white male over 40. Therefore, he's got to be the bad guy, Chris. Yeah. So that's why he needed to be there. But they didn't develop the character particularly, and more to the point, he ate up screen time that I think could have been spent on Mary Seacole and maybe exploring her character in the way that they did Charles Dickens. If you're going to be brave enough to reach back into history and to touch a figure like this, I think you owe that character, just like last year with the character in the Second World War, you owe her more than this. Wherever you sit on it historically, and like I say, I'm no expert, this is just something I found out in the last 7 days. Wherever you sit on it, you owe her more, and you owe children in particular out there who are receiving this and latching onto characters and who are going to the internet and looking them up. You owe them more. Yeah,
because I think this episode was nowhere near as busy as the first one, but I felt I still felt we are still suffering a little bit because there was still quite a few plot lines, and I think and Mary suffered for that because he had multiple things going on. And I agree with you, and that's what that was my other thing coming out of it. I was like, do you know what? I actually would have really liked this to have been a proper old-fashioned historical, where it is majority that's your focus.
Yeah.
Not as in a temple, not Vinder, not Dan hitting Sontarans on the back of the head. It like I said, it just felt obviously nowhere near as scattershot, and I just think this is going to be a thing we're going to suffer for the whole series now, that he's going to have a bit of too much going on.
There's a lack of focus, isn't there? There's a lack of conviction that, okay, this week we're going to do this. And and I think scattershot is the perfect description that it is. We are still back at that kind of difficult situation where it feels like Chibnall is still throwing everything at the wall and hoping that something will stick, be it historical characters, be it seeing a massive mothership from the Sontarans sitting over Liverpool as you've got on screen now, be it alien baddies rampaging around an alien temple. It is just
Simon,
just throw everything at it.
All this stuff that took place in contemporary Liverpool, was there any real reason why that couldn't have taken place in the Crimean War too? How all of a sudden are the Sontarans able to, if not time travel, then communicate across centuries? What is going on?
Well, and also why?
All of that?
Also, why? Why were they in Liverpool? There was no reason. There was no decent explanation given as to why they were, or maybe there was and I missed it. In which case, again, it's still sloppy writing.
Apparently, they turned up in Liverpool the exact same time. No, they had actually been in Russia and China before the Crimean War, so they hadn't even heard of Russia and China. So they'd been there for a while, but they'd only just turned up in Liverpool like a couple of days ago, and that's the curfew. I thought it'd be some kind of alternate universe kind of thing. So, the Sontarans have always been here, but it wasn't really that clever. It wasn't actually that clever.
I think it was like one tiny bit of dialogue before the dog ships did the shield. I think they said they slipped in.
Yes.
But why Liverpool? I still don't get, why did they go to Liverpool, where Dan just happens to come from? Is there something I'm missing here?
And they're still communicating. They're still able to communicate between 2021 and 17, whenever it is. It's absolutely, not only is it baffling, but it just feels completely unnecessary. And as you say, scatter shot, give them a bit. I think what he wanted to do is give them a bit of more Russell T Davies, because these scenes of contemporary Earth, contemporary Liverpool in this respect, they were scenes right out of a Russell T Davies episode, and meeting Dan's parents too,
who I also loved. I loved them.
They were good. Can I also point out, because we sort of got into it, the worst joke in the entire episode, which was the temporal tempura. My hand just went into my head like that, and I was like, "Is it tempura?" And I'm like,
The problem with this is you're showing your companion to be completely and utterly stupid if they think tempura is going to get confused with temporal. It's just, let's just set up a character and make them look as thick as we possibly can. And this is the character we're supposed to like and want on board the TARDIS. Oh,
and it's not just even that. Let's make him stupid, but really capable in other scenes. Like he can sneak onto a ship and like take out a load of the enemy and do what. And it's just like
no problem at all.
Well, it's fine because the Sontarans can never actually hit a moving target ever. I think they've only been able to shoot unarmed civilians. They can't meet Dan when he's running away.
And they can shoot one another, Barnaby.
Oh yes,
they seem to be able to shoot one another, no problem at all. And Neville and Eileen, who are Dan's parents, we meet them in this episode. They're played by Sue Jenkins, and who's Neville played by? I don't got that name. Sue Jenkins.
Broughton.
Paul Broughton. So Paul Broughton and Sue Jenkins. Sue Jenkins I recognise from Coronation Street from years and years ago, and they were lovely in these parts. But it did seem to me that this was Donna's grandfather and mother done over, and so little time was spent developing these characters. It was almost as if we accept somehow, as the race memory of Doctor Who fans that we've all got, we recognise this visual language and this dynamic from the Russell T Davies era.
Maybe I didn't really sort of see that, but maybe it's just because I've just gone a little bit mad kind of watching all these episodes, and so anything that just comes along that's somewhat different or reminds me of
I could be too cynical with it. I don't know, because I thought they were fine in the roles. I did kind of enjoy.
I think they were fine. I think I think their intro into the episode was kind of upstaged by the terrible continuity error, where about 7 Sontarans go around that corner into that alleyway, and Dan turns around. There's only 2 of them there. I mean, that was a terrible continuity error, which I got very annoyed about. So I noticed that. This is a prime example. I noticed that at the time, and I remember stopping and thinking, "Wait, what?" But as I was watching it in real time, and I'm certainly not going to pause this and go back over certain scenes. I didn't want to prolong it. Please don't.
So I just moved along with the episode and forgot all about that until you just mentioned it. But yeah, it's noticeable.
Yeah, I noticed that. So really, I was just mostly just like flabbergasted from that. So when they kind of like turned up, I was like, oh, okay, brain is gone now. Okay, what? Okay, we've got the parents and they're holding saucepan and a wok. Okay, so I mean, I didn't really connect it to Donna and Bernard Cribbins, really, but yeah. I
could be too harsh there. Well, I think we're at the point now where we have to talk about the big returning presence in this episode, and probably the bravest thing Chris Chibnall's done so far, I think, is the return of the Sontarans, the classic Doctor Who monsters from we first saw back in season 11, wasn't it, Simon, in the Time Warrior?
Indeed, it was season 11, 1974. Gosh, yeah, I was 6 years old and remember that so clearly.
That episode does get a name check too, doesn't it, Barnaby? In fact, so does Lynx.
Yes, we do get riding a horse and things like that, which is quite fun. I approve of that. I approve of reminding me of happier days in the classic era.
To be honest, I thought it was great seeing riding a horse, because that's what we got with Lynx in the Time Warrior. Why not? I don't have a problem with it. I think they look good on horses, actually. I know they've had a bit of flack, but I think they look good on horses.
Chibnall, as regards to Sontarans, he goes to a certain amount of trouble and time in this episode to come at them again, because the Russell T Davies era did depict them in a very particular way. It reimagined them visually, and kind of reimagined their place in the Doctor Who universe. And although I don't think he necessarily did dumb them down, I think over time and one character in particular being turned into a recurring character in a very comedic way did kind of chip away at the Sontaran menace a little. But I think Chris Chibnall goes to some effort to reframe that and to polish them up and to refocus on the core principle of the species as originally imagined by Robert Holmes, doesn't he, Simon?
Well, yes and no, because again, we're back to schizophrenia, because on the one hand, yes, he tries to sort of recalibrate them, and then he has them hit on the back of the head with a wok, and
Yes.
he has a dog alien just literally blast half a dozen of them like Skittles for no reason. There was absolutely no need for Calvinists to do that. They could easily have got out of that situation without having half a dozen of them knocked down by a laser axe. To me, I've said before now that the Sontarans are my absolute favourite alien baddie of Doctor Who of all time. Forget Daleks, forget Cybermen, I'll always take Sontarans. But what really irritates me, in all of New Who, they've always been used as this kind of comic relief. They're like the light entertainment baddie. So the Daleks are always really, really shown as mean and horrible and terrifying. The Cybermen are as well. We've never seen sort of comedy Cybermen. And yet the Sontarans, and in fact, even Doctor Who magazine in their review, it says, historically, the Sontarans have always been the comic foil. No, wrong, they haven't. Not in the classic run. They were never, ever the comic foil. You look at the Time Warrior, Sontaran Experiment, even the Invasion of Time and the Two Doctors. There is nothing comic about those Sontarans whatsoever. They are not comedy. They're not comic relief. And it just frustrates me. And Russell T Davies absolutely started it, and Moffat nailed the coffin lid shut in making them supposedly, historically, these comic relief, light entertainment villains. And they're not to me. And this is one of the reasons why I love the Sontarans so much. These are the meanest bastards you are ever going to meet in space. They're the real meanies. They're the real baddies.
Yeah.
Daleks are conditioned to be like that. Cybermen have removed all emotions, so they're like that. The Sontarans have no justification. They're just mean for the sake of being mean. They're not comic relief. And can we, that's what frustrates me. I'm just let go of the Sontarans being comic relief and make them what they're supposed to be, which is just absolutely terrifying, because they are the baddies of the universe that you absolutely would not want to bump into in a dark alley. And that's why,
so in stripping them back visually, and I know that you've got mixed feelings, haven't you, about the redesign? But you
I don't
can
even have
see
mixed feelings, Dan. No, I don't have mixed feelings. I hate it. They're not mixed at all. I hate it.
Okay. But you can see that efforts have been made to reconnect back.
I agree. The efforts have been made, undoubtedly. And I recognise that, but I do get annoyed when people say, "Oh, they've gone back to the classic look." No, they haven't. You're quite right, Dan. They've looked at the classic look and they've taken a few bits and pieces from it and popped them on, but they haven't returned to the classic look. And it's, for me, as I've said before, it's just a case of over-designing them. Why overcomplicate them? They never needed all that armor. They don't need all the armor and the utility belts now. They don't need all the bits and pieces stuck on. Just keep them clean, sleek, just as they were. The silhouette of the Sontaran is untouchable. And I'm very pleased to say in the new episode, the silhouette still looks good. And they absolutely have their moments. But why over-design them, to me, to this extent? And the masks, I don't care what anybody says, the masks still look like shakedown Sontarans to me. The Lynx mask, the Lynx mask looks undoubtedly like a real creature. I can believe that is a real living alien creature. These look like what they are, which is rubber masks. They're over-designed, they're plastic-looking, and so to me, it's just not an improvement. No, they're just I'm sorry. Sorry.
So
what can I say?
In this story, they do build two characters, don't they? In particular, two Sontaran characters. We've got Jonathan Watson plays Skark, and Dan Starkey plays the character of, I knew I was going to struggle saying this, Shlivid. Both Sontarans, one at the very top of the chain, the commanding officer, and one is a foot soldier that we first meet, who's been cared for by Mary Seacole in her hospital. We spend more time with him, and I think that is an attempt at the script to come at the Sontarans from the other direction, and their code of honor and everything that the mythology has told us about them over the decades, to kind of boil it down in bringing back Dan Starkey, who played Strax throughout the Stephen Moffat era, that sort of comic relief character, to employ him again to play a Sontaran. It probably could be seen as a no-brainer because he does play these parts very, very well, doesn't he? And this character couldn't be more different from Strax. But again, ultimately, I've got no problem with how the character was depicted, but the Doctor kind of lets this character go back to the Sontaran regiment, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Where he's immediately executed Barnaby. Now, is it just
probably
me?
Knows that. She probably knows that as well, which also scatterbrained and schizophrenic as well. This character, this episode, and this Doctor as well. You know, promoting life, you know, promoting goodness around the universe, but not averse to letting a living creature get executed by his own people. So
actively sending him to his death, Simon. Is there any other way of reading that? I just found it really weird.
Yeah, absolutely. And Barnaby's quite correct because this is one of the main problems I had right back in Chibnall's and Whittaker's first series was with Arachnids in the UK, when the Doctor willingly chose to let the queen spider or whatever it was, the giant spider, just die a slow and painful death, rather than being put out of misery quite quickly. And then also in the next scene, pretty much allowed all of the bad spiders to be lured into a room where they were all suffocated very, very slowly to death. So again, this just shows complete schizophrenia in the character. How can I like this character? And this is just it's not just bad characterization, is it, Charlotte? It's inconsistent characterization and storytelling.
Well, it's Chibnall seems to really not. How do I word this? It's like he's got a really warped sense of what the morals of the Doctor is. He seems to really, in one breath, make her, like you said, I have to protect life, nobody dies, I hate violence, I hate guns. And it's like he's got such a surface level understanding as well of violence with this Doctor. Because what she does at the end, also, what her little lecture at the end, once, like you've just all pointed out, she sends one to his death, means her morals just flip and flop and go from one extreme to the other. So when she is trying to be high and mighty, you can't believe it. And when she is trying to
what you're pointing to is that Chris Chibnall has no sort of plan, no overall shape to his scripts. He's writing it scene by scene by scene, and almost as if he never goes back over it and views the whole. Do you think?
Well, it's more like I said. It just boggles me how he seems to see violence just from his writing. It seems to be a really surface level reading of it, that all violence is bad, but when it suits the plot, the Doctor's okay with violence. And also it's like I said, it's like past Doctors, because I've got to be fair, there was bits I really enjoyed in this episode, but it was this issue of violence and morality that really took me out of it with the Doctor. And it's like and this is the thing that sort of I have been, like I said, I don't think about it a lot, but this is the thing that was sort of in the back of my head. It's like Doctors in the past, yes, on the surface they don't like violence, they're against it. But my understanding from all the previous Doctors is that's not a hard and fast rule. When circumstances dictate it, they understand you need to use force. You need to even use violence sometimes if your enemy is not going to let you live, or if your enemy.
The Doctor is somewhat of an oxymoron.
Yeah, and it's like, and these are Sontarans. So like you were saying, we all know what Sontarans are like. They will just kill. They'll just fight. They'll just have a war for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So you can't try and moralize with a Sontaran, which is what she was almost doing near the end of this episode. And another really quick one, and it is connected with the Sontarans, and I don't know if I'm overthinking this. How on earth did they not know that the Doctor was female yet? That was just boggling my mind, because this Doctor's been in the universe for a good amount of time now. Like, she's had adventures, she's faced Daleks, she's had some big battles, like when it comes to recognisable villains. And there's a whole story plot line when she
more to the
tricked them
point, Charlotte. More
because
to the
they
point,
didn't know
though.
it was her.
More to the point, if Time Lords are now accepted that they've always been able to change gender, and it's just a matter of fact, an everyday thing, that's who they are, then other civilizations that they've come into contact with will also be aware of this. Or are we expected to believe that the Doctor is the only Time Lord that the Sontaran Empire know of? I don't believe that's possible.
Well, the problem is there's no point even trying to rationalize it, because we all know it doesn't make sense, and we all know that just like with the throwaway comment earlier in the episode, which is basically a two fingers up to fans who don't agree with the gender changing when the Doctor says it's fluid, which I could have just screamed at yet again. It's just an opportunity for Chibnall to just remind viewers that we've changed the character of the Doctor, the gender of the character, whether you like it or not. It's the right thing to do. It was about time we changed the gender. And so you Sontarans, he's basically calling us viewers who don't agree with it Sontarans. We're locked in the past. We don't get it. You know, we're thick. We are no better than Sontarans. And so, again, I just find the whole thing just deeply insulting. If you're going to change the gender of the character, for goodness sakes, just move on, get over it, and just tell a good story, and stop reminding people that you've done it.
Particularly after three seasons. I mean, my whole problem with Flux, generally speaking, is the fact that I feel that even though I find some of it almost entertaining, diverting at times, any scene that Jodie Whittaker's not in basically diverts me to some degree. Some of it almost entertains me. The problem I've got is that I feel that this is way too little, way too late, and this feels like the kind of energy, the kind of story even that is being told. This should have been what he was doing back in 2018 as a starting point, not an end point. And whilst I feel that the series, the character of the Doctor has certainly regressed, I feel that the look of the series itself has, for one reason or another, also slid, and the freshness that it once had, I mean, that was gone by week 4 of the Chibnall era. It's never really recaptured it, and as such has searched for its own identity and flavour pretty much ever since. One of their blessings probably in the past has been the director Jamie Magnus Stone, who directed this. He directed the previous one as well, the Halloween Apocalypse, which I found really flat, and I was taken aback by that, because I usually think this director's got a lot of flair and a lot of talent. I felt he was very much back for this one, and this certain sequences in it did look beautiful, particularly that battlefield shot, and some of the points, some of the moments in the fight did feel, if not brutal, then certainly they were pacey, and you felt like you were actually there, which is something that I don't think I've got in this era, come to think of it. I certainly didn't feel it in the last season. And I don't even think they managed to sell me on them being in the Punjab, in Demons of the Punjab either, although that was slightly better. But I think Jamie Magnus Stone is somebody who has probably got a big career in front of them and made some sequences in this look beautiful. But it was only some
face masks. Yeah. He's got to take some face masks at least. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah, so I noted that, and I say he's been on the squad with this show for a couple of years now, and usually I think if it wasn't for his involvement, other episodes in series 11 and 12 would have looked a lot less pretty. And you know, this is a TV show, it's supposed to look nice. It'd be nice if it would actually say considered and valued things to us and entertain us in a robust and satisfying way, but Rome wasn't built in a day, was it, Charlotte?
But no, and I think it's like also not just the battle scenes, like when they were wandering around on the battle and you just saw bodies and all of that. That was quite evocative. That actually sort of went, oh, that took you back almost. Like that's quite a stark image. And I do think when they were leaning into that, it worked in this episode. When it was sort of showing, because this was a war story. For all the sci-fi and the silliness, this was tackling a war, and even the really badly delivered message at the end was about war. So when they were showing the starkness and the sort of the stakes and what you lose, I actually thought that was done quite well. But like you said, that was all Jamie. That wasn't the script that was telling you that. It was the sort of the shots and the way they were filming things.
I think that when you look at episodes like this, and you take in some of the brutality of that, and how it's ambitious really to recreate any moment in history, particularly when you're talking about an anthology show, basically for a family audience. This isn't something that's going to spend 6 to 8 weeks over a long period of time exploring a complex set of characters against that backdrop in a nuanced and responsible way. These are snapshots of history that are meant to excite and to entertain on the weekly, and then onto somewhere else the week after. And that's why I'm not going to big this episode up at all. I still think it was. I still think it represents a failure in many respects, but it's the best episode that this era has yet produced.
Yeah.
And I don't want to let that go unchecked. But just because that may be a fact, that doesn't mean this was good. That it doesn't mean this was a quality piece of television. It certainly doesn't mean it was a good script. Most of the acting was pretty good. None of the regulars. Most of the acting was pretty good. Yeah. And I feel the screen time was largely, because this ran for nearly an hour, was largely used quite well. And yet, the more I thought about it as time went on, the more I thought about the clear plot holes. I mean, now you've told me about the continuity errors, Barnaby, some of which I obviously did spot and just like blink past or whatever. But for me, again, I'm no how can I put this? I'm no script doctor. Lots of plot holes in other shows get past me all the time, and historically a lot of Doctor Who ones have too. In this, they were popping up absolutely everywhere, and to the point where I couldn't not notice them, and I had to wonder. I think Chris Chibnall knew they were there as well and just didn't care. I don't think this was something that had been, they'd edited that bit out or whatever, because this, like I say, this is like an hour's worth of screen time. I think it's generally the playbook that he's gone back to is just to play the whole thing just like Broadchurch as a 6-week mystery box. Keep it moving that quickly that even though it may not be making sense, or you may be dancing over key points, it won't matter. If it moves fast and if people are saying enough snappy things to one another, then everything will be fine.
In many ways,
Jingle keys, yeah.
Yeah.
In many ways, the frustrating thing of this episode, because I would totally agree with you, Dan, this is the best Chris Chibnall episode we've ever seen. And again, I would agree with you. That doesn't mean it was a good Chris Chibnall episode. It just means it was the best one we've seen so far. But in many ways, it just highlights the failings of the Halloween apocalypse specifically, because that suddenly looks like a completely redundant episode, because as Barnaby was saying earlier, you've got all these plot strands all over the shop, none of which get resolved and don't even get talked about in episode 2. So really, what was the point in bringing in weeping angels, characters that we can't even remember the names of now, etc., etc.? It was all complete window shopping. And so suddenly that Halloween apocalypse looks even less substantial as an episode. And the other thing is, it just also goes to highlight why the entire previous 2 seasons of Chris Chibnall are completely a waste of time, should never have been made. And had War of the Sontarans been the very, very, very first episode that we saw of the Chibnall-Whittaker era, we might, it's possible,
Yeah.
we might all have looked at the Chibnall era with very different eyes, and we might have said, it's not quite for us, and no, the female Doctor isn't for us, but, we can see what they're doing. We might have been a little bit more generous to it, but unfortunately, because we had 2 previous seasons that insulted our intelligence at best and offended us at worst, we're just left... Our backs are up against the wall with Chris Chibnall, and we're kicking against it. And so I just find it really frustrating that actually, as I say, had this been the very, very first episode of Series 11, history might have been very, very different. Might have viewed the Chris Chibnall era very differently.
See, I sort of agree and disagree, because I've sort of alluded to it and I'll talk about it. The Doctor basically having a go at the General, that ending... that took me completely out. Like I said, the whole them not knowing she was female. I was like, okay, but when we got to that ending, I was actually, I sort of said off screen, I got so angry, and I was back to series 11 and 12 almost with my anger at this Doctor and the writing of this Doctor. Mm-hmm. Because
the Sontarans are vanquished, aren't they? That's the upshot of it. Just like the Sycorax in the Christmas Invasion, they are sent off with their figurative tails between their legs after a defeat by a ragtag bunch of people and a couple of kitchen utensils, whatever. But they're sent off. Most of them.
When you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous.
They are roundly defeated and shown the door, and yet, the general character puts into practice a complete destruction of the fleet of Sontaran ships. Does he wiping out the Sontarans of the present, certainly in the immediate area, and gives the justification that they killed a lot of his men, and that's when the Doctor spits her dummy. And that's what stands out, isn't it? Because this is something we've had before. This whole confrontation between the Doctor and this general character. You can see what Chris Chibnall is trying to harken back to. He's trying to make us think of the 10th Doctor and Harriet Jones, or the 3rd Doctor and the Brigadier at the end of the Silurians. He's trying to give us that moral crescendo to it all. That bit when the end credits are finished and we're off, you go make yourself a cup of tea or whatever else, and you're still thinking about the moral complexity of it and the call that is made. But the texture isn't there. The authenticity in the main character, that's not there, because everything that she said up to now has been no more or no less than the behaviour of the General. Her incongruence is loud and seemingly proud when it suits her. So when you see her calling out this guy and coming down on him like a ton of bricks in the 13th Doctor's customary fashion, we're back to the Wasp at the picnic. You just get out of my face. Don't want to hear it. Don't want to know. There's got to be something else on the other side.
And the problem is, of course, because as we've already talked about, the Doctor has just very, very dubious, questionable, fluid, to use her word, fluid morals. It makes it really difficult then to actually pay any attention when she takes the moral high ground. It is literally, as you just said, it is just get out of my face. It's just like you can't preach if you have dubious morals to begin with. And let's be honest, the General had pretty good justification for wiping out the Sontarans. He made a mistake, but that is war. You tell me one act of war.
They were at war. A load of his men had been killed. He'd got his enemy in a compromised position.
What are you going to do? You can hardly criticize the General for taking that approach, because as I say, we've got to remember this is war. They were at war with each other. And war is not kind.
And that's why, if he's trying to harken back to the Christmas Invasion, it fails miserably.
Yeah.
Because the Sycorax, they were a new villain. Also, we didn't know what they were like, and they came across as a very proud sort of, like, honour and all those sort of things meant a lot to them. So the Doctor basically humiliating their leader they probably were never going to come back. They probably
Yeah.
were completely fleeing. So
Yeah.
it did come across as overkill almost for Harriet Jones to do that. So
Yeah.
you could understand the Doctor's anger, and
Yeah.
also this was a first adventure after a regeneration, and sometimes the Doctor can be a little bit more. Trying to think, like he'll be a bit more forceful, he'll be a bit more rash when he's just come off a regeneration. So that made sense. So if he's trying to harken back to that, Chris, you've completely misunderstood the Christmas invasion scene, because you are with the Doctor in that moment. You don't question why you did that. Whereas with Jodie, I'm sorry, the majority of people that I've spoke to have all said, yeah, the General was in the right.
That's how I feel. Well, also the Sontarans had actually told him that they had claimed that planet because of Lynx had claimed the planet. Historically, that's how their entire culture, their entire race felt about it. So if that is the general perception on Sontar, or wherever their base of operations is, then he was sending that message, wasn't he, Barnaby?
Yeah, I mean, they said it themselves, a tactical withdrawal. They never said they weren't ever going to come back, and we never had any impression that they weren't ever going to come back. Of course they can't come back. They've been going on and on and on about how they really wanted to take Earth because of Lynx and because they had taken that claim on that planet. So, yeah, that also just kind of had me just sort of like going, what? When she just has but she needed her lecture. She needed her lecture for the episode.
But the other thing that really you have to question here, and this puts it in context really, would Chibnall have allowed the same thing to happen to the Mary Seacole character? Would there ever been any option in his mind that Mary Seacole would have taken out the Sontarans, and would the Doctor then have given a lecture to Mary Seacole? No, of course that would never in a million years have happened. And so, but it's okay because it's just a military, But actually,
white, middle-aged man.
I mean, you don't like to say it, but yes, basically, Dan, that's true. Whereas actually, the military leader had every justification going for getting rid of the Sontarans, and cannot really be criticised for that. And so you just have to think, well, of course, it was going to be the white male military leader that Chibnall was going to give that particular act to, so that the Doctor could then sound off against. It's lazy, it's easy.
So again, it's so unsurprising, so unsophisticated, so glib about it too. And I really do feel that he let himself down with the simplistic anchoring of this, what could have been an enjoyable and roundly successful chunk of Doctor Who. To, I won't say blew it at the last minute, because it was all far from perfect. But I think they could have left the credits playing with a little more dignity than this. It's not like, as you've said, Barnaby, it's not like we've never heard the 13th Doctor lecture anybody before now, is it?
Mm-hmm. No, par for the course with Chris Chibnall, really. So nothing really surprises me anymore. But I agree with you. I'm more interested in I can't believe I'm about to say this. I'm more interested in Swarm. As played by Sam Spruill, a fantastic performance from underneath what is basically a Power Rangers take on the Red Skull from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But that's okay. I can live with that. This is Doctor Who at the end of the day. It's a delightfully villainous turn this man is giving from underneath that prosthetic. I love it so far. Not so sure about Roshenda Sandal as Azure, but there's something haunting about her too. I suspect we'll see and hear a lot more from her in the remaining 4 parts. It's a sort of a trio of characters, with the third one sort of nestling in the background who hasn't said a great deal. It kind of reminds me of the 3 villains from Superman 2. We've got General Zod, Non, and Ursa. Maybe I'm just hoping against hope there. So whilst I think he's great, and I will acknowledge that, this entire plot about the planet Time that gets named in the last sort of quarter of this episode, all of this is when I'm starting to get that sinking feeling. I think we spoke about it earlier on, that Chris Chibnall is about to Chibnall us. And that this season of Doctor Who, which up to now has been
seemingly wanted to entertain. Whether it succeeded or not is neither here nor there. That he is about to deliver another stinking great big pile of law-destructing poo in our driveways with wherever this is going, because he gave us one completely unnecessary origin of the Doctor less than 18 months ago, and there are spoilers out there for the rest of the Flux story. I think, if you know where to look, there are spoilers for this absolutely everywhere. They all sound pretty feasible. And it does seem to me that because it's all connected to the Timeless Child overall storyline, that we're about to effectively get a second origin story that will possibly be even worse than the first.
Dan, you can't say that to me. I thought, they couldn't get worse than that. I mean, the horse is bolted, that kind of thing. We've already seen.
Barnaby, there's more of the racetrack yet. There's more of the racetrack.
I don't think he knows where to. I don't think he knows when to leave well enough alone.
I haven't seen these. Sorry, I haven't seen these spoilers at all. So this is the first time I'm hearing about this.
Me neither, Barnaby. This is all news to me. Totally news to me.
So I won't go into them on the show, but it's all. And I think, to be honest, I mean, just watching this episode last Sunday before I'd seen various spoilers and information that came my way, I'd had that sinking feeling there. And the upshot of it is, it's all just in what's been on screen so far, just feels like more mumbo jumbo, which I think is a great shame. Where what we could have had was a nice bit of vintage villainy. And another end of the universe story. Maybe end of the universe stories are 10 a penny in shows like Doctor Who. But if you're making the show correctly, and if Doctor Who is functioning as it should be, as this sort of oiled machine, then every few years, each end of the universe storyline should be some generation of children's first end of the universe storyline, and it will feel to them like the biggest story ever told and like nothing they've ever seen before. And that's why I think a lot of us have given other eras of the show kind of hall passes with the end of time and the silence and all this kind of thing, because it's supposed to be in the moment. Doctor Who, I get the feeling in 3 weeks' time, we won't even be half smiling about all of this.
Well, I really hope you're wrong about that, simply because I agree with you, Dan. I can't actually believe I'm heaping as much praise on a Chibnall episode as I actually am. But I do actually agree. Was it the traveller that's lurking there at the back? Was that
the passenger? Yeah,
the passenger. Thank you.
With the wish mask. Yeah.
Yeah, and the wish. Yeah, exactly. In the $7.99 mask from the internet.
That's hit social media as well. Just in case people don't know what we're talking about, this character of the passenger, it was discovered within a day of him being on screen that the mask that he wears, it's not something that's been custom made, considering this is quite a big presence in just 6 episodes they've made for this series. So you would have thought there'd have been a few quid left in the coffers. But it's a mask. It is a paintballing mask that this character wears that has been bought directly off the, what would you call it, discount hardware store, Wish, an app that I'm sure that everybody's seen it in the App Store for £7.99.
And it's a shame because, I mean, just looking at the character, the costume, it isn't just the mask, it's the whole costume. Absolutely looks as though they knocked it up. They suddenly realised on the day before filming, flipping it, we forgot the passenger's costume, which is a shame because Azure and Swarm look absolutely phenomenal. They look fantastic. They are a triumph of design. I'll happily admit that. They are unusual. They're unique. They're a new
memorable,
take.
aren't they?
There are a little bit of originality in there. Beautifully performed. I agree. Azure isn't quite hitting the mark for me through no particular fault or problem, other than that she just I don't know whether it's that she hasn't got as
done
good
much
material to work with. Yeah, it's a lesser character. But Swarm is an absolute stonking, proper, classic Doctor Who character. I still have a major problem with how Swarm managed to escape from the impossible to escape from prison with no explanation or justification whatsoever. Now, I trust Chris Chibnall. I know he won't let me down because he's such a good writer. I know he will have a good reason further down the line in episode 3 or 4 as to how Swarm managed to escape from that prison.
Introduce the division as this nasty kind of a black ops division of the Time Lords. They're so difficult to get any sort of handle on, let alone your hands on, that the Doctor has been scouring the universe seemingly and the time streams trying to find out more about them. And yet a situation like that, they're pretty easily dismissed. They seem to talk absolute nonsense, and both division operatives were dead within moments of them being on screen.
And yet again, it's just sloppy writing because there's just no need for that to take place. You either come up with a good reason as to how Swarm escaped, and I give benefit of the doubt, I will wait for that to happen, or better still, you just don't need Swarm to have escaped from a prison in the first place. There's just no need for that. It's just clumsy writing again. Swarm can just appear from nowhere. That's cool. I can deal with that. I can't deal with him escaping from an impossible to escape from prison without a justification, which is a shame because, the character of Swarm in particular is great. As a kid, that would have absolutely had me utterly terrified. And again, it's just frustrating that these are the kind of monsters, villains, that we wanted to see right back at the big series 11 instead of the monster with a blue face with loads of teeth in its face. That's what we didn't want to see,
Before we go for our break, I've just got 2 questions for you guys. Firstly, what would the Doctor do?
Thank you.
Chip, stop torturing us, please.
We're supposed to find all that charming and touching, and to think of Yaz as being very vulnerable, and we're supposed to be able to relate to her. And secondly, where do you think that people can go to hear more great cult conversations? I think the punters want to know that, don't they? Maybe it's the Fandom
obvious.
Podcast Network. Yeah, I think it could well be. I'm talking, of course, about the Fandom Podcast Network. Now, Type 40 is just one of a dozen plus fantastic podcasts concerning all manner of your favourites in popular culture. Now, here's our friend Kevin with a few words about all of that, and then you can meet Barnaby, Charlotte, Simon, and myself back here in a moment for more talk and the all-important scores for this episode of Doctor Who in a couple of minutes.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We'd like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
But if you head over to tpublic.com, go and search for the Fandom Podcast Network storefront, and you will find a whole galaxy full of merchandise featuring all the logos from all of those shows on T-shirts, key rings, mugs, tapestries, and a galaxy full of other items. You can treat yourself, treat your other selves, and it all goes to help support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain, so everybody wins. There we are. We're back with Barnaby, with Charlotte, and I think Simon too, for more talk about War of the Sontarans and our roundup, what we thought of the whole thing. Can we possibly give it a score? How can we do that to Chris Chibnall after slating's episode for so long? We're going to find out in a couple of minutes. But yeah, what I wanted to ask you guys was, how close an eye do you keep on the ratings for Doctor Who, Barnaby? Is this something that you've always been interested in, or that you're aware of?
Just a passing glance, really. I mean, it's only really recently that it's kind of like come up with other reviewers and other YouTubers talking about it a lot more. And it has been, from what I've seen, it's been a downturn when other people tell me it hasn't. But from what other reviews have said, it has seemed to have been like a full-on like downturn in the UK ratings anyway. And I'm sorry to say, it's not really that surprising. People are kind of like just not really tuning in like they used to. I mean,
it's definitely. The ratings of Doctor Who have, certainly as long as I can remember, been a low-level obsession of a lot of the fan base. And I think, in all fairness, it's simply because they were used as a stick to beat the fan base with, not just by the press, by the mainstream press, but a lot of the time by the people in our lives, people who are of a certain age will remember this, by the people in our lives. Say if we were at school and the other kids at school thought you were a nerd for liking Doctor Who, when Return of the Jedi was much, much better, or the A-Team was much, much better. The fact that the ratings were often talked about in the newspapers, particularly after Michael Grade axed the show in 1985, and then it went into its sort of 18-month hiatus and reprieve. Ratings, the whole ratings story, narrative with Doctor Who has been talked about ever since that moment, as if it was always only a couple of moments away, a couple of points away from being at crisis point. And I do think that over the decades, perhaps that's amplified to ridiculous proportions in the minds of Doctor Who fans, because when you're around at the time, this thing had gone from being the biggest kids show on TV that everybody loved to, within 3 or 4 years, not so much being a joke, but being perceived as a failure because BBC One didn't want it anymore. And all that made, as I'm sure you've seen, it was headline news. And yeah, it was used as a stick to beat fans themselves with. So it's a case of, I think we feel like we have to keep watching what's going on in the ratings to be prepared for anything that may come our way, the slings and arrows. That's a disclaimer as to why because people ask me every week when I report on the ratings, not just on the podcast, but over on the Type 40 social medias, on the Facebook page or whatever, and we publish these stats. Who cares? I've heard this week, who cares how many people are watching Doctor Who? Well, the BBC care. They make the show. I always say there's no more market for TV that people don't watch than there is for food that nobody eats. But generally, my point is that watching the ratings, Doctor Who-wise, isn't a new thing, and it's not something that we should feel guilty about, and it's certainly not something that means that we're traitors or that we want the show to fail. But I believe that, just as Simon, you've often spoken about how Doctor Who inspired you to work in television. Mm-hmm. Barnaby, it's the same to you to some extent, to choosing acting as your profession. And it's the same for a great deal of other people. And so when you're interested in the industry or in the craft from either side of the camera, keeping one reasonable eye on how it's being received by the viewing public, because this is a product at the end of the day. It may well be an exercise in creativity, but it's creativity for a purpose, to inform and to entertain, to roundly entertain as many people as possible. And the more mainstream your show on the more mainstream a channel, and BBC One is still the most mainstream channel in the UK, then it is all the more important that as many people as possible are watching your show, can relate to your show, look forward to your show, and are anticipating and talking about either the episode that's just been on or the one that's coming next.
No, as you say, Dan, at the end of the day, however much the BBC is a public broadcaster, it is still a commercial organisation, and it has to justify its existence. It has to justify the existence of certain shows on the channel. And so as a result of that, of course it cares what its ratings are doing, because otherwise, if it doesn't care what its ratings are doing, it means that ratings can just go down to absolutely nothing at all. And then the BBC loses its justification for existing in the first place. So, of course, ratings are important. But also, they're also important, not on a commercial level, but just purely on a basic level of, look, are people actually enjoying this show? And if they're not enjoying it, what is the point of doing it? You've got to have a certain number of people that enjoy doing it. Otherwise, it's just a very minority product that you wouldn't be pouring quite so much money into. So just on a pure basic level, you want to know that your show is being enjoyed by people.
Oh,
yeah,
so sorry, but I can't help but notice that. Sorry, guys, I can't help but notice that people out there in the broad Doctor Who fandom we're talking about specifically now are more than happy to talk about the ratings when the show has done well. When it, for example, has come back with a new Doctor and done something quite bold and controversial, and people flock to it just to see what may have happened, whether it's a triumph or a car crash or not. You know, people want to hear about ratings then. But when something happens, such as what's happened in the last 7 days, then it's very much a case of open fire on the messenger every single time. Mm-hmm. The ratings are published for each episode of Doctor Who when it airs on a Sunday evening, as it does currently. Ratings usually appear around midday on the Monday. And Doctor Who fans, being as they are, they go straight to Barb, to the official source of these figures, and they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook pages, they're on websites, official and unofficial. This becomes part of the story. It becomes something that the public, albeit only a proportion of the public, become aware of. The ratings for the first episode of Doctor Who, I think, were lower than I expected. They weren't lower. Charlotte was actually almost bang on with her prediction. But they were, by any stretch, I think that Chris Chibnall would certainly have hoped that the Halloween Apocalypse would have got more people watching than it did. That came in at 4.43 million viewers on those all-important overnight figures. Overwhelmingly, the majority of Doctor Who viewers still come from the overnights. This is another fact that people seem to not want to hear, but it is nevertheless a fact. For War of the Sontarans, they lost nearly 500,000 viewers. Just 3.96 million viewers tuned in to see this last Sunday on BBC One on the night. 500,000, that drop, just simply in a 7-day period, that is a big drop, isn't it, Charlotte? It's not something that can be just brushed aside.
Yeah, and it is especially a big drop as some people who have not liked the last 2 series were actually quite positive about that episode. I know people who have had nothing but bad things to say, and they were actually really enjoying that first episode. So if you can lose viewers off an episode that's perceived overall, and I'm saying very loosely here, perceived overall, as a good episode, then you're snookered, because even when you're perceived as doing a good episode, there's either bits of the episode which are enough to make people turn off. But what I think that 50,000 is, and why when you were sort of saying on the live show a couple of weeks back, what do you think it's going to get? I think now we are seeing the impact of that season 12 finale, because obviously the specials are a bit of a blip.
Maybe even the entirety of series 12, when loyal viewers turned up for that for potentially 10 weeks. I mean, and that figure went down and down and down, as we know. It's a question of, do I really want to get on board for that again, and or worse?
And I think, like I said, for the special had Barman on. It's always a bit of a blip, the special anyway. It's like its own little entity, so that's not a good gauge. And I think this series is going to be where you're going to see the damage. And like you said, even though we've had 2 episodes now, which are, on the whole, they've got good bits, even bits we can all say we've enjoyed.
I think we've all said that, haven't we? That this is, generally speaking, still an improvement.
Mm-hmm.
We've all got in the back of our heads, what are you going to do with the Timeless Children? What's going to be this end journey of this canon storyline you're doing? And I think that's the problem now. He's got too much doubt. He's made people second guess this. He's got the fans going, well, even if I enjoy an episode, I know at a point you're going to have to either add on to this story arc or make it better. And I don't think he's going to make it better. Yeah, I think it's distrust. And I think it's this, and we've sort of said it's the combination of having Whittaker as your doctor. I'm sorry people don't want to hear this, but she's a massive turn-off. Yeah. If you've got if your central character isn't engaging,
Charlotte, I think that's what it is. I think that is the crux of this matter. I think they could tell potentially any story, be it on the night or any arc story over 5, 6, a dozen episodes. It could be the best story in the world. People have bailed on her. This show, more than a great many dramas on TV, even those with that identifiable central character, this more than most, I believe, stands or falls on how people feel about the person at the center of it, because everything else going on around it is so furious, so what's the word? Unlikely, far-fetched. So you have to be anchored with that character.
It's secondary. Like I said, he can have all the distractions of a good villain, of a companion like Dan. That I quite like, but he's going to have to eventually go back to this doctor. He's going to have to go back to Yaz, even by an extension of that, because she's the sort of long stay companion at this point. And I just think, I think too much damage, and I think people I think we didn't know how much damage until the series started airing, and now we're seeing it. So I think God help them when they get to episode 6.
Barnaby, 500,000 is a huge number for any show, isn't it, to lose in one week? It shouldn't matter really at which point in a series you are. That sends a pretty loud message, doesn't it?
It's a huge number, and not surprising at all, because it has been some series have been genuinely hard to watch. It's been genuinely painful for me to watch some of them. So it's just kind of like, of course, if you don't feel, as Charlotte said, connected to the main character. I saw actually on I'm a big on the PlayStation Store, they've released the VR game. I can't remember what it's called now, the Edge of Time or something along those lines.
No, I think it's Edge of Reality. I think that's what it is, the new one.
Edge of Reality, they've released on PlayStation, and I was thinking, oh, shall I buy it? But then it's Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor, and I'm just kind of like, I don't really want to, after all the awfulness we've been through in the last 2 series, I just don't want to buy anything that's connected with the product, because I'm sorry, it'll just be grating, and I just can't be, because I can never, I just think back to those just terrible ones, like in the Timeless Child, and I think it's just been ruined, and the ratings have reflected that, and there's just something which people can't really sort of argue with, particularly losing 500,000 watchers. It's huge.
There's also the figure as well, Barnaby, the audience appreciation index This is how they measure how much the audience who actually watched the show enjoyed the program. So they compile it by consulting specially selected panels of around 5,000 people who go online to a secure website and rate and comment on the programs that they've been asked to watch. The figure for the Halloween Apocalypse was 77. They usually scored out of 100, I think it is. So the previous week was 76. There was the tiniest increase for War of the Sontarans up to 77. But I think that roundly, for a program to be considered successful, it should be getting 80 and over. I can't remember why 80 is the precise number, why that's seen as the sort of watermark, but it's still falling quite short of that. Bearing in mind that, if you've got the television on and you want to watch a show, you're there, then you are already partly invested. You've invested potentially an hour of your time.
Yeah, that's what I think as well. Because the however they gauge this appreciation has to be from people who are watching it who like it as it is right now, and some people do. It'd be boring if we were all the same. Some people do enjoy it, and that's great. I can only talk from my own personal viewpoint. So really, I would look a little bit more at the ratings than I would at the appreciation personally. But I'm not. I don't work in that particular field, so I am just a fan with a dream.
Simon, last time on Series 12, you compiled and gathered together all the ratings for those, and we went through it all quite forensically. You've always been very clear when we've spoken about ratings on this show about why they're important, how seriously the TV industry takes them, what their relevance is to a modern BBC in the face of streaming and things. We're now in 2021. This is 18 months on from the last series of Doctor Who. There are people out there who are clutching onto this belief that overnight figures don't matter anymore because there is iPlayer. But that's simply not true, is it?
No, it isn't true. And the thing is, I think it's one of those things where, with the greatest respect, unless you have worked in the industry, you simply don't understand the significance of those figures. I've worked at the BBC, I've worked for commercial television, and I've worked for independents. And it doesn't matter. Across the board, you're just always waiting for those figures to come in, to validate what you're doing. It's exactly the same as a salesperson waiting for their sales figures to come in, and if those sales figures are poor, they know that they're going to be in trouble. So you as I say, for anybody that's worked in the industry, they understand that literally you are almost on tenterhooks waiting for those figures to come in. It's difficult to express how major those figures are, and so that's why don't people believe you when you say that, or believe anybody when they say that? I don't know, Dan, but they don't want to. And I've had so many arguments with so many people on social media where they just completely undermine it and say viewing figures don't matter. Nobody pays attention to viewing figures anymore, and that, as I say, it's just so wrong and so patronizing unless you've worked in the industry and you know how they work, in the same way that I haven't worked in sales and I can't understand the significance of sales figures, but I can see why they are significant. And so I respect a salesperson saying, believe me, those sales figures are all important. And so I can assure you, as somebody that's worked in the TV industry, believe me, those ratings are so important. I can't, anybody that works in TV would exactly the same thing. And so it's just frustrating when people just choose to ignore.
I understand why people may stand up, may defend an era of the show that they are particularly enjoying. There are 5 or 6 people on Twitter who really love this era of Doctor Who, and God bless them. But that aside, it is the simple fact is, in the days since that figure was released, the level of hostility and intransigence that I've seen regarding these figures and anybody who talks about them in a less than positive way, That's a tall order. The series has just lost 500,000 viewers in 7 days. You're supposed to spin that however you can to make that not seem negative, to be credible or to be objective in these people's eyes. Just pure cope. Firstly, no, I'm not objective about Doctor Who. I'm subjective about Doctor Who. This is Doctor Who. I've been watching it all my life. I know what I like and what I don't like. And you know what? At my age, I also know why. And I understand why you may feel differently, and I can respect that. So why doesn't that work both ways? The ratings to Doctor Who are another question entirely. They are completely and utterly objective. That is the thing about cold, hard facts that neither you nor I can argue with. And that's a very hard lesson, it seems, for some on the other side of the aisle to take on board, to accept, to process. And that is one of the frustrations of living in 2021, everybody.
Yeah, but that also adds to why the ratings are important in a sense, because we've sort of
they're the only objective fact we've got, Charlotte. They're the only objective fact we've got.
Yeah, but there's the elephant in the room. This era, we know there's a focus on pushing narrative, whether that's political points or virtue signalling or whatever term you want to use. We know that's a factor in this era. We know
and
that there's a
admitted by
reason,
the BBC and admitted by Chris Chibnall, for that matter.
Yeah, we know that Jodie's appointment wasn't completely like all the other doctors' appointments. You're not fooling anybody with that, and it's like this elephant in the room we can't talk about. So this era had to prove something. It had to prove that the female doctor works, that the female doctor was the right way to go, that the show needed to go this route because it was getting stale, it was getting old. That's the sort of way some parts of the fandom almost talk about pre-Whittaker doctors. So the fact that she had to almost prove, and this is one of the reasons I do have sympathy with Jodie, because she how do I word? Because I'm trying to think how to word this. She had to prove a lot more than her previous doctors purely because of being the first female doctor. So the ratings going down each series is proving a point that some people don't want to accept, that this main character, you never should have changed the gender, and you're failing ratings every series is proving that even more so. So that's another reason why the BBC probably are very worried about these ratings, because they had a different plan probably at the beginning of this run, that it was all going to be rosy and we were going to get David Tennant almost viewing figures again. But we're getting the opposite. So that's also another thing. It's...
Yeah, no, I still think... Oh, sorry, Charlotte, I think I've got a delay on my end. Sorry.
No, and it's also funny, this is what I finished with, that Peter Capaldi, it was okay to criticise his ratings. It was okay to use that as a reason to basically say he needed to go. But with Whittaker, we can't talk about it.
No,
I mean, go on, sorry, Barnaby.
No, you go ahead, Dan. I think Charlotte's definitely summed up, pretty much what I was going to say just
I
then.
agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Looking back to War of the Sontarans and our subjective reaction to it, I was wondering how many whacks with the old wok out of 5 would you give this one, Barnaby?
Oh, God. A solid 2.5 whacks. Two huge whacks and then a little tiny one, I'd say.
A tickle.
A tickle, yes.
How about you, Simon? How many whacks with the wok do you give Chris Chibnall's latest effort, War of the Sontarans?
I'm going to concur with Barnaby, 2.5, because it's by no means good Doctor Who. But if I'm basing other Chibnall episodes on sort of like 0, then this is a massive step in the right direction. So 2.5. It sounds good to me.
And Charlotte, go on, get your swinging arm ready. How many whacks with the wok do you give this one?
Well, I have to be fair. I gave the last episode 2.5, and I had a lot more issues with that one. And there were bits I was actually getting into this one. So I'll give it a 3, because slight increase. But like I said, that ending scene, I was just absolutely taken out of it. So that's
what about you, Dan? What are you
Yeah,
I gave the last one 2, and although I think this one was better in many respects, I still can't bring myself to give it more than a 2.
Fair play.
I think that over the time in between, I found watching it diverting, almost entertaining in places. And yet, in the days since, reflecting on it, it seemed to fall apart. And getting together and speaking with my friends, I've actually thought a lot less of it. I probably would have given it a 2.5 yesterday. But now, I'm not going to score it lower than last week's because I think it was an improvement.
Yeah, it was.
But generally speaking, I think it's still getting as much more wrong than it's getting right. And so I'm finding it not good enough. I know I may sound like a stuck record. And by my own admission, I'm disenfranchised with the show. Can't wait to see what comes next. But I'm still trying to be as generous as I can, as if I was watching any show, starring anybody. And this would be my reaction. I wouldn't feel compelled to watch. I think I'd probably watch the next episode because the cliffhanger was again quite strong. I probably would watch the next episode, but I wouldn't watch it on the night. I'd catch it in the week on catch up, which is kind of what I'm doing. I haven't even got a TV license anymore. I watch this down my mother's house in the week, Monday, Tuesday, whenever. And so that's where I am with it. Yes, it's still sat at 2 for me. Must try harder. We'll see what the next episode brings. We have episode names for the 3 episodes coming next. Chapter 3 is called Once Upon Time. I know. Chapter 4 is called Village of the Angels, and Chapter 5 is called Survivors of the Flux. So whenever the Flux happens, we know it will have happened by week 4 at the latest. I don't think we're even going to see, I think he's going to have the Flux, whatever that is, happen in the gap in between week 4 and 5, because that's how you know you've been Chibnalled. Doctor Who continues on BBC One in the UK and on BBC America over there for the next 3-4 weeks. We'll be here with further reviews, helping one another through this orchestra of average, courtesy of the world's worst showrunner, Chris Chibnall. It's all going to be out. Look, it's all going to be out on DVD, Blu-ray, and there's a steelbook on the way. That's coming on the 22nd of January, 2020, for all the completists out there. That is the old girl calling time on this particular edition of Type 40, but I'll be back with another one fairly soon. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home feed for Type 40, type40.podbean.com, or over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Google Play, Podbay, all over the place. Or you can just pick us up on the Podbean app itself. We're also on YouTube, the world's largest streaming platform, on the Spacebooks YouTube channel. Plus, we're still on the fabulous Fandom Podcast Network's own master feed, loaded with so many treats for your ears daily. Maybe you'd like to get in touch and have your say on this slating of the latest episode of Doctor Who. Get in touch with us through our social media, Instagram and Twitter at Type40 Doctor Who. Leave us a comment in the video track to this on YouTube, or get in touch through email, type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling really brave and fancy some real-time, extra-dimensional chit-chat, head over to the Type 40 Facebook group. That's over on Facebook. Just enter Type 40 into the old search field there, and we'll pop up. There's generations upon regenerations of Doctor Who fans from all over the world and a few other worlds. We've definitely got our suspicions about some of you out there. They're chatting, sharing, and now and again arguing about all things time and space. Where can people get in touch with you on social media, Simon?
Oh, they can find me on Facebook, and that's it.
There you go. Simple. There's no fat on that. And Charlotte, where can people find you on YouTube?
I'm part of Type 40 Live, so catch us on Thursdays. And also Daniel Leach's channel, because we've done a new Line of Duty review, so we've got that up.
Fantastic.
Ooh.
And that's spelt. How do you spell Daniel Leach for the people out there who may want to search?
Oh, now you're testing me.
Leitch, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So go and find the Daniel Leach channel where they're talking about that Line of Duty and other TV favourites, aren't you? That's a couple of times a week you get together and do them as live streams.
Well, we do one a week, and then we have our little breaks in between.
There you go, simple. And Barnaby, you've got a YouTube channel too, and people can find you on social media, can't they? Over on Twitter.
Yes, I am on Twitter. I bow to peer pressure, and I'm now on Twitter at Barnaby. And keep an eye out for me in the new. There's something with me coming out soon. Keep an eye out for me on in the new History Bombs video coming out soon.
Ooh. What's History Bombs?
Oh, it's a series, a YouTube series where we do basically all in one take, like a sort of a rap about particular historical eras. I've been one about the Cold War and Jane Austen. It's a brilliant It's a brilliant YouTube series. It's a BAFTA award winning series as well. And if you watch the Cold War one, I do a very good Kennedy impression. So
I'm absolutely going to go and check that out. Yeah, well, that is all we've got time for this time here on Type 40. We always have the time if you have the space. Yeah, but that's it. Take care. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.